back at it again, baby, and we have another one with Thomas Sowell. Let's dive in.
The Vision of the Anointed. Now that's an interesting title. Who are the anointed?
They are the elite in the media, in politics, all of those who think that third parties ought to be making people's decisions for them. The subtitle is Self-Congratulation as a Basis for Social Policy. In other words, people who think that everything that's wrong with the country is due to the fact that other people are just not as smart as they are. And if only they could, or people like them could take over and make our decisions, we'd be so much better off.
But in early America, didn't this sort of educated class make the decisions for everybody?
As far as governmental decisions,
yeah.
But the government itself didn't make the decisions for everyone. Now, you can't decide where your kid's going to school. You can't decide whether or not they can move a halfway house for drug users next door to you or whatnot.
It's out of your control. The government decides that.
That's right.
Stuff.
The government decides too many things. They decide also how your children will be raised. You may have an idea about at what age children should be introduced to sex, and in what manner, with what kind of moral commitments.
You mean as a parent?
A parent, yes. The schools have taken that over. By the time you even think about it, they've already had years, of showing.
They're passing out condoms to these kids.
Passing out condoms is not even the half of it. They're showing motion pictures of naked couples engaging in sex, both homosexual and heterosexual, in the 7th grade. And if you complain about it, that's considered to be censorship.
You can't pull your kid out of school and say they don't have to put up.
7th grade. I would have said 8th grade, as far as, having that kind of conversation, or at least starting to, because at that point, like, you're about to go to high school, which we all know what happened in high school. Okay. We don't need to get into that whole conversation. So the reality of the situation is I could teach you about it now, or give you like, the preview, or you're just going to learn about it when you run into it, which could possibly be worse, but you guys can let me know how you feel. Obviously there was a whole thing about, teaching kids this kind of stuff when they're in kindergarten, which that is obviously out of the window. But I do think closer to high school, I would have said 8th grade. You guys can let me know how you feel though. I do remember myself going to, I forgot what the name of the whole thing was, but yeah, I mean, our teachers talked to us about the birds and the bees, not like in a trying to convince us to go either way, but just like, hey, this is what this looks like. This is how you protect from this situation. Just the basics kind of situation, not in depth or anything like that. We had like a full day, if I remember right, where we just basically learned about that all day. But you guys can let me know how you feel. Talk to me.
With this stuff? I guess you could, but you'd be...
Well, if you have a private school to put them in, but you have compulsory attendance laws, and if you don't have the money for private schools, then you're stuck.
Where did this country get off the track and decide that the federal government should make most of our decisions?
Well, it started to some extent in the New Deal, but I think the 1960s is sort of the golden age, if you want to put it that way, of this whole mindset. And that's what the book's about. It's about a mindset. It's not about a series of policies, but of showing how in policy after policy, those who think a certain way will try to take over other people's decisions.
How do you characterize the liberal philosophy today from the conservative philosophy?
Oh, that's a tough one. I guess the main thing about the liberals, again, is that they think a program will do it. If there's something that they don't like in the society, you have set up a program and that will solve the problem. I think one of the words they use a lot is solutions. And I argue here and elsewhere that there are no solutions. There are just trade-offs. So, for example, when Ralph Nader launched his attack against the Corvair many years ago, he said,
that's an interesting thought process. There are no solutions. There's only trade-offs. Very, very interesting. I've never heard anyone say that. But yeah, let's hear his example of what that actually means.
So, for example, when Ralph Nader launched his attack against the Corvair many years ago, he said it's an unsafe car and it has these safety problems and those safety problems. And in some respects, he was correct, not all. But the fact is, there were other things that a Corvair would do that made it safer than other cars. And on net balance, it was as safe as the rest of them.
Are you saying there are no solutions to our problems as Americans?
There are no solutions to anybody's problems. There are trade-offs. Safety is a classic example. Every year, so many hundreds of thousands of people are vaccinated against measles, smallpox, those kinds of things. Now, this saves several hundred lives, it's estimated. It also causes brain damage to about 30 kids a year. Now, there are no solutions in that. There are just trade-offs.
What about crime? Take crime as an issue. Can we?
Interesting example. And I've always heard about that kind of stuff. You know, the side effects of a lot of this stuff, and you always hope that you aren't the like 0.1% that happens to have a bad reaction to something. But yeah, I guess that is a different way of thinking about it. There's no solutions. There's actually just trade-offs, because even in situations where you think it's an actual solution, there's negatives that come along with that solution. So you're just trading a certain set of negatives or one set of negatives for another.
There are no solutions in that. There are just trade-offs.
What about crime? Take crime as an issue. Can we solve the crime issue, or fundamentally solve it so it's reduced?
Well, then that's a trade-off. You don't solve it. There will always be crime. Yep. There always has been, but you want to keep it down to some level. It's not this astronomical thing we have today. For example, the liberals right now are saying, crime has eased off in New York, and that's true. There were 6 times as much crime in New York a few years ago as there was in 1960. Now it's down to 5 times as much crime as there was in 1960. Now that's not what I regard as a great trend, unless it continues a lot more sharply.
The liberals think we need more education, and we need.
My solution to stamping out some of this crime: harsher penalties. Harsher penalties. Give more people the chair. We'll say that. Give more people the chair. You take a life, you get the chair. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. If it's first degree, obviously, you accidentally hit somebody driving down the street by accident. Of course, accidents happen. Unfortunate, but they do happen. I don't believe in that situation, or even second degree, that should happen. But first, yes. But you guys let me know how you feel. Maybe, I know we don't all feel the same way, but let me know why or why not.
To help people in the inner city more, to cut down crime there, conservatives would say we have to be tougher on crime. Is either of them correct?
I no. You see, the conservative view is really not a solution. It's a trade-off. It says, yes, it would be wonderful if we could do all these things to prevent crime in the first place. We just don't happen to be that smart. And so what we do, we put people behind bars who commit violent crimes. Now, a few years ago in East Palo Alto, which is not far from Stanford University, a minority community, low income, they had the doubtful distinction of being the murder capital of the United States in proportion to their population. The next year, murder and all sorts of other violent crimes dropped tremendous amount, 30, 40, 50% in 1 year. Now, that wasn't because they discovered the root causes of crime or because they worked out everything that was wonderful. They launched a campaign that put a lot of the bad guys behind bars. And when they were behind bars, they didn't commit as many crimes.
Makes sense to me.
And the thing that even in a high crime area, the great majority of the people are not criminals. And so if you can just put your hands on those people who are raising all the hell in the community and take them out of circulation, the crime rate drops.
People say there's undue emphasis on African Americans for committing crimes. Is that true? Ed Koch wrote in a column here that the population is 25% African American in New York. 62% of the crimes are committed by African Americans. Is that and he says
I haven't checked these figures, but yeah, throughout the world, this is not unusual. Throughout the world, people are disproportionately represented in all kinds of different things. And it's true, obviously, in basketball. It's true in all kinds of other things. The main thing is not to keep people out of jail because they're one race or another, because when you do that, the people who are going to suffer the most will be the black community.
Where are you on affirmative action?
Against.
Why?
Well, you can only do one of two things. You can either just judge people individually, or you can judge them by groups. This whole notion that you're going to come out with a compromise, I would defy anybody to come out with a compromise on that. You're going to do one of those two things. Now, you can pretend to be doing other things, but that's all you're going to do. Those are the only two choices you really have in the end. Again, the people who are the anointed think of this as a symbolic issue, and they want to be on the side of the angels. They don't ask, what are the consequences? Now, I've studied affirmative action programs around the world. One of the consequences is that those people who are more fortunate in the group that has the preferences, those people take the lion's share of the preferences. Very often, those at the other end of the scale, the poorer people actually fall further behind. That's true of blacks here. It's true of Malays in Malaysia. It's true of various groups in India. And there are reasons for that. You can say you must have certain proportions. Nothing is easier than for an employer who might otherwise locate, let's say, in the Bronx, to locate out in Provo, Utah, where he will be not near any black people, and therefore he will never have lawsuits, and the jobs will be in Provo, and people will wonder, why don't people, here have more jobs? It never seems to occur to liberals that other people are not blocks of wood, that when you set up certain incentives, they will react to them in certain ways. And when they do that, the result may be the opposite of what you set out to do.
How do the anointed refer to people they don't agree with?
All sorts of ways, but I think the main thing is they believe that you're not merely in error but in sin. In other words, they can't believe that you're just mistaken. You must have sold out. You must be something warped about you.
You guys are for the rich. You guys only care about the rich guys. Answer that. How do you respond? Liberal says conservatives only care about rich people.
Well, one of the things I go into in the book is that the whole notion of rich is ridiculous. That most Americans don't stay in the same income bracket, even for 1 decade. So the same guy who is, quote, rich now was 20 years ago probably in the bottom 20%. I mean, I was on a cruise recently, a luxury cruise, and the guy said, if someone had told me when I was growing up that I would end up on a cruise like this, I would have said, get real, man. That very few people are in that same income bracket the whole time. Right. The genuinely rich and the genuinely poor, I would estimate to be no more than 3% of the American people.
Really?
Put together.
Really?
Yes.
Genuinely poor. Now, I'm seeing numbers like when they were talking about health care, they said, 30 million people couldn't afford it or something? That's
several million of those were making more than $50,000 a year. So it's not, see, this is one of the things that you know.
More than 50K, and they can't, whoa, man. And I think, well, let's finish what he had to say.
Going to do. They never believe that people make choices a year. So it's not, see, this is one of the things that you're going to do. They never believe that people make choices. There are people who have the money. They prefer to put that money into a BMW rather than a
lot of young people do.
And that's what I was gonna say. I wanted to hear what he said before I said it, but I feel like a lot of people, their money management skills are garbage. And I think more of this kind of stuff should be taught in school, how to manage money, because that's something that we all have to do. If you aren't taught it, then you're gonna learn. You hopefully won't have to learn the hard way, but a lot of people do learn the hard way, and you can't afford this now, you can't afford that because you're stuck paying off this credit card, and now you're falling behind. It's a whole loop. It's a whole loop, and they're not teaching that kind of stuff in school. They're teaching pointless stuff, and it's crazy.
Didn't want health care. They were betting on their health.
Absolutely. And then this allows them to buy more stuff they want to buy. So it's not a question that they couldn't afford it. It's a question they don't choose to spend the money.
What about mean-spirited? Conservatives are mean-spirited. They're bigots. They don't like people.
Well, one of the things I tell people say, you're a very tough person. I'm not tough. Life is tough. I'm merely trying to acquaint you with those facts.
Back in the 60s.
I'm not tough. Life is tough. And I'm just trying to acquaint you with those facts. That is true. That is a fact. Life is tough. And I feel like some people want to make life seem like it's a crystal stair and everything is sunshine and rainbows all day, every day. Nobody's ever going to say something crazy to you. Nobody's ever going to look at you funny or say anything mean to you. Life is just wonderful. Yeah, okay. We'll see how that works out for you when you get out into the real world. Yeah. Life can be beautiful, but you know the old saying, the sunshine wouldn't feel so good if it weren't for the rain. Sometimes we're going to have them rainy days. Learn to appreciate them. Know the sun is coming out right after.
I'm merely trying to acquaint you with those facts.
Back in the 60s, Lyndon Johnson announced a war on poverty. Am I wrong? But there are more poor people. I mean, in other words,
today than there were then, yes.
Yeah, there are more poor people. Yes. I mean, this was a hell of a war. We lost it, apparently, because for the last 30 years, we've been dumping money into these poverty programs.
Oh, absolutely.
Where's the money go?
Oh, it supports a whole industry of people who run those programs, who talk about those programs, research those programs, bureaucrats, and so on.
Doesn't help poor people.
No. The tragedy, you see, is that the anointed really want to make symbolic statements. And running these programs makes those symbolic statements. They don't really care if in the wake of affirmative action, for example, companies start locating away from minority communities so they don't even get involved in legal action. They don't care about that. They've made their statement on the side of the angels, and that's what's important.
Have you ever debated Jesse Jackson?
No, I haven't.
Is that because, would you like to, or would he not want to do that?
I have no idea.
You'd be willing to, I assume.
Oh, maybe. I don't know.
You think that's too much showbiz?
It is. You know, there are people who go and do this, and I'm doing less and less of it. And I tell them the story of an African boxing champion who fought an Irishman in St. Patrick's Day in Dublin. And he lost his title on what the sports writers called a questionable decision.
Yes.
And so you have to know what forum you're talking about.
Right.
I saw Shelby Steele on with him, and I said, you know, if Jesse Jackson and Shelby Steele each had to present a 2-hour lecture to an audience with an average IQ of 120, Shelby would wipe him out. But if they had 5 seconds each on Donahue, it would be Jesse Jackson all the way.
Right.
So everything depends upon the forum.
That makes sense. That makes sense, for sure. Thomas Sowell, man, coming with the facts and stuff that, you know, you wouldn't have even thought about. I was like, wait, why wouldn't he debate him? Like, what? Huh? But now that he explained that part, okay, makes sense.
Is Jesse Jackson good for African Americans or not?
He's not. Good for himself.
Good for himself.
And that's true of most ethnic leaders in most groups, in most countries, in most periods of history. That what will serve his interest is to keep people paranoid, dependent upon him, dependent upon government. What will serve their interest is typically just the opposite.
That's pretty interesting. So you're saying that the leaders, whatever group, leader, wants the people to be poor and dependent on them as opposed to dependent on themselves.
Oh, absolutely. And you see this in the greatest cynicism in the academic world, where in many places, black organizations on campus have a say on who gets admitted. And they have turned down blacks with excellent credentials, both as students and as faculty members. For that very reason.
Who are the mascots of the anointed? You talk about the mascots of the anointed.
They're people whom they choose to back and whose rights are supposed to override other people's rights. The homeless are a classic example. I'm appalled when I see people out there in the street giving money to the home. I mean, able-bodied men. I think one of the classic pictures to me was in San Francisco, when there was this able-bodied white man out in the street begging, and there's this black lady coming along there, very modestly dressed, like she didn't have, but she's stopping to open her purse to give him some money, you know. And I thought, good heavens, have we really come to this? And we've been brainwashed by the anointed into thinking this is what we ought to do.
What do you say to guys who bum money off of you?
Not all of it can be repeated on the air.
Oh man, he's hilarious. Not all of it can be repeated on the air, but I was interested in hearing what he had to say because I'm guilty of doing that. I've said that before. Whenever I see a homeless person and I know that I have a couple spare bucks on me, sometimes I don't, but when I have a couple spare dollars, I'll stop and I'll hand them the few dollars that I have. Now, obviously, I'm not like handing them hundreds of dollars or anything. It's more like, you know, no more than $10 at most, and that's probably only happened like once. It's more, most of the time it's like $3 or $4 or something. So yeah, I was interested to hear what he had to say, you know, as far as the homeless thing goes, because I do that myself, and I'm sure some of you guys do the same thing, you know, because you just feel bad and you just want to help. And I get it. I said the video that I said that in, one of you guys commented and said, don't hand them money because they're just gonna go buy drugs. And my perspective has always been, that's fine, but I know that I did my part to try to help in some way, shape, or fashion. It may not have been like the perfect way to help, but I don't know it, and that's always been my way of helping. But maybe I need to change that mindset.
What do you say to guys who bum money off of you?
Not all of it can be repeated on the air, but the fact is they don't get any money.
They don't.
And people who complain now about all these people begging in the street, there's a simple answer. Don't give them money, and they won't be in the street.
When you wrote this, what were you trying to accomplish with the book, and did you do it? Were you nailing liberals for 30 years of social policy? What were you trying to say?
I was trying to reveal the thinking behind that, the kinds of assumptions, the kind of world that exists inside their mind, and therefore why those assumptions are so dangerous in the long run. It's not just the policies mentioned in that
They
book.
think they're better than everybody else.
Oh, absolutely. There's no question. And that's what makes them dangerous. Even all the policies that I mentioned there, 20 years from now, those policies may not be the policies we're concerned about. But that mindset will still be there. And what makes them tremendously dangerous is that facts that contradict what they believe are simply ignored or evaded.
Where does the press fall into this as the anointed group?
And that is why we need to have debates, and we need to hold these politicians accountable to step on a stage with somebody that disagrees with them, that is very knowledgeable on the topic, and we need to have debates. We have to bring that back into the mainstream to hold these individuals accountable, because if they're on national television, right, and we have a true, honest moderator, let's just say I'm the moderator, both individuals are allowed to debate for an hour-long session, maybe longer, but we'll just say an hour. So everything gets put out onto the table. All of the facts, all of the lies, all of that is going to come to the light, and people are going to see, okay, well, what you've been saying is total BS, because I've listened to what he said, and he's brought facts, statistics, and everything to refute everything that you've been saying this entire time, and you haven't really had a good comeback. Then I think politicians will stop the BS, stop the lying. But I don't know. Maybe I'm totally wrong. I'm sure that I am, because it's not being done. So there's something that I don't know about the whole situation or equation. Maybe they'll still try to lie even if they lose a debate.
Are they part of the?
Oh, absolutely. They're a major part of it, because one of the reasons that people don't get many of the facts that go against what's believed is that the press doesn't choose to publicize those facts.
Give me an example of something the press might not cover or cover well.
Oh, a few years ago, there was a story about prenatal care among blacks, that black women get less prenatal care than white women. Infant mortality rate is higher among blacks. They immediately assume that one causes the other. Now, one of the things I like to do is go back to the original source and find out what it said. I went back. On the very same page where it said that, the figures showed Mexican Americans get even less prenatal care than blacks, and they have a lower infant mortality rate than whites. So prenatal care and infant mortality rate have nothing to do with each other. If you break it down further, black women who have only a high school education, but who are married, their children have lower infant mortality rates than white women who have a college education, who are unwed mothers. So it's not race, it's not income, it's not education, it's lifestyle. When you live a certain way, there are consequences to that. The media doesn't want to accept that. Because if you say people's lifestyles have a lot to do with the outcome, then there's no room for the anointed.
Ooh, Thomas Sowell always bringing the facts, and always a joy to check him out, because he does bring the facts. He does bring the knowledge. And, like I said before, checking out these videos is definitely eye-opening. Definitely acquiring a lot of knowledge with these videos. Hopefully you guys are doing the same. But yeah, let me know about the debates. I'm gonna keep trying to push this until we can actually make this happen. Because I think it would be something that could be huge and eye-opening for a lot of people. But yeah, y'all let me know what you thought about this one in the comment section below. Like, share, comment, and of course, hit that subscribe button before you go. It's the little thing right up over there. Click that to subscribe right now. All right? Peace and love. I'm out.